Thank you, Paula. As you all know, we are fast approaching the election to decide on RTA Next. People on all sides, and I think there's more than two sides, on all sides of this two-proposition initiative have a lot of good points to make about our current transportation system in Tucson and Pima County as a whole. RTA Next is a project of the Pima Association of Governments, or PAG. PAG is a nonprofit organization with one rep from the County Board of Supervisors, the State Transportation Board, the Tohono O'odham Nation, the Pascua Yaqui Tribe, and each incorporated municipality. These 9 leaders work to represent their own locales in the greater Tucson region in their decisions regarding transportation planning, air quality, water quality, and economic vitality. PAG's staff were asked to design a plan that would fulfill the diverse interests brought to the table by those 9 representatives. So, for example, we have tonight Nick and Kate from I'm always remembering your name. It is the
Coalition for
Coalition, yes, for Sonora Desert Protection. Still learning how to get all those words on a row. And they had someone assigned to be on the committee that took the design intentions from the PAG Council, and they were asked to do something with those ideas. So apparently, I can only imagine the amount of negotiation that went on in that process. Meanwhile, there are transportation visionaries among us and in and out of planning departments who are reframing mobility around convenience, safety, neighborhood scale access, not just continued roadway expansion. So we need to understand that the plan is past the stage of public comment. It's a vote coming in March. Second, we need to recognize that no plan will be perfect in its conception. I think everyone said there's something in that plan for everybody not to like. But we hope there are also things in that plan that we can like. And that's what we're here to talk about, and also to think about what will be done after the plan is passed, because transportation is still going to continue to evolve. Our needs will evolve, and our ideas will evolve as we go forward. We have a common goal, which is sustainability at all levels, and that includes in our transportation system. We invite you who are here tonight to listen, to learn, to imagine, and to inquire. At the heart of sustainable planning is relationship, the relationships in our community with our neighbors and the groups with which we associate. At the basis of these relations is the fundamental sense of common ground. In that light, we invite you to approach the evening in the spirit of respect and curiosity. The format is that each person will have a chance to answer a question, and and that'll be a round. First round will be a question that starts going to Kate, and then to Kylie, and to Logan, and then another question. But in between each round, we will have 1 or 2 questions from the rest of us in the audience. So please feel free to put something in the chat or to raise your digital hand. Please know also we could probably spend twice as much time as we've got scheduled tonight talking about so many good ideas that people are having about sustainable transportation. But we want to respect their time, so we will close the formal conversation, question and answer, at 7:15. And I'll introduce each person when it's their turn. I'll have the least to say right now about Kate, because I just got her bio, which is much more than I can say in a minute. So, Kate, would you like to just give us a little background about yourself and the organization? And then I will ask you, what were the visions? What was the charge given to you by the 9 members of the PEG Council.
Definitely. So my name is Kate Houghton. I'm the co-executive director for the Coalition for Sonoran Desert Protection, and I really don't blame you. It's too many words. So we are an independent watchdog for the Sonoran Desert landscape here in Pima County in southern Arizona. So I would say, first of all, we really weren't given any charge beyond participating in the Citizens Advisory Committee. And I should be clear, our former executive director, Carolyn Campbell, did that as an individual. So that Citizens Advisory Committee did have experts in it, but they were representing their individual views, even if they were bringing some expertise from their work and other roles in the community. So Carolyn Campbell sat on the Citizens Advisory Committee twice, once for RTA Plan and then again for the RTANext that we're considering now. The other connection that we have with PAG is our board chair, Christina McVie, sits on PAG's Environmental Planning Advisory Council. So to the question of what the charge was, really they, I guess, would be having looked to Carolyn Campbell for her expertise on environmental issues. And what she would have pushed for was research and infrastructure that would allow wildlife to better move across our roadways and our landscape here in Pima County. And we really had very little of that work done when the RTA plan was put into place. So that's what turned into what is called the environmental element or wildlife linkages budget that you'll see in the plan now. And the CAC, I should say, was advisory only. So it made recommendations to the RTA board, and they ultimately decided what would or would not make it into the plan. So once RTA plan passed, they formed what they called a wildlife linkages working group that then made decisions on exactly how the funds would be spent. That same process would happen again if RTANext passes. So there'd be a working group that decides how to spend the $50 million budget that's in the current plan for wildlife linkages. And I should say that last working group actually settled on about 100 million in urgent projects for our landscape here in Pima County. Only 25 million of that was spent down. So there's many urgent projects left to go, and that's why the Coalition for Sonoran Desert Protection is really hoping to see RTANext pass and that work take place.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Kate. And we're already being brief in our speaking that gives us more time to ask questions and answer them. Logan Havens currently serves on the Living Streets Alliance Board and the City of Tucson Housing Commission. He's an architectural photographer and designer with his partner. They have a home that's included in the City of Tucson's ADU Model Plan Library. So they are leaders in this field of design. His work and interests focus on the intersection of housing, land use design, and ecological systems, the goal being to create environments that are really both functional and beautiful. We need beauty as much as we need function. So thank you. And I'll add a word about Living Streets Alliance. As they put it, we envision streets as living public spaces that connect people to places and to each other. A Tucson where people live through the city with dignity and ease, no matter who they are or how they get around. So thank you for that vision. And Logan, the question for you is just a little different. Um, what is your vision of a sustainable transportation system for Tucson and Pima County now and for future generations?
Thank you very much for that question, Stuart. My today I'm speaking both as a board member of Living Streets Alliance and also somewhat for myself. My interests are quite wide. When I think about Tucson for the future, I think about the successes of Tucson that we see now. Some of that being the streetcar funding that was through the original RTA. That was about $75 million. And what we saw with that was a transformation of our city. We saw billions of dollars of reinvestment into our central core of our city. We saw neighborhoods built, we saw transportation added to our city, and we saw small businesses, affordable housing, market rate housing, everything being built and centered to create a community hub for our city. We feel the effects when we go to things like any like Zopa Circus or any of the events of our city, then the Mercado District, which was created as a result of that streetcar funding. And then we see the bicycle infrastructure, the loop, the multi-use paths, and all of this network that has made it so that people can walk, ride their bike, be in a wheelchair, drive, or take transit around our city. And so when I look at the city of the future, I look at that success and I would want to greatly expand on that. I'd like to see a lot more transit so that people, the third of our population that are too old, too young, disabled, choose to not own a car like myself. I have not owned a car in Tucson for about 8 years. Or those that just can't afford vehicles, with it being our second highest household expense. We'd want to see dignity for those people to move through the whole city. And then I agree with the sustainable Tucson, where the idea of, like, I would like to see neighborhoods develop all over our city where maybe we don't have to travel as far, where we could take a nice walk to groceries, or we could walk to a coffee shop, or we could walk to a little hospital. Yeah, when we look at Living Streets Alliance, we really want to see that a safe access to the whole city for all members, no matter how they get around. Thank you.
Thank you, Logan. And the same question will go to Kylie. Let me just say a little bit about Kylie. She's been advocating for sustainable transportation for 17 years, putting in a lot of sweat equity, starting with her time as Education and Outreach Coordinator for BICUS in 2009. There she served on the Tucson-Pima County Bicycle Advisory Committee, and they helped clear a path for our Bicycle Boulevard network. How many folks here use the Bicycle Boulevard network ever? Anyone? Yeah. Okay, of the hands I can see, there are several people. And yeah, all right. And also on the RTA's Downtown Links Citizens Advisory Committee. She co-founded Living Streets Alliance and worked for 10 years as the Cyclovia Tucson coordinator, bringing open streets to neighborhoods across Tucson. In 2020, she left LSA to join as a senior policy aide to County Supervisor Matt Hines, Dr. Matt Hines. She was his transportation policy advisor, and now she is the Chief of Staff for Ward 6, working with Miranda Schubert. She has followed very carefully each step on this RTANext plan creation and has some observations she looks forward to sharing. So shall I put the question to you again, Kylie?
Yes, please.
Okay. What is your vision of a sustainable transportation system for Tucson and Pima County, now and for future generations?
Well, thank you for that question, and also thank you for allowing me to step in and substitute for my boss, council member Schubert tonight. Every single one of our staff members is at a different meeting tonight. So that's 6 meetings happening on this Tuesday. So I'm glad to be here. I recognize many names and faces of friends that I've known in Tucson for a long time. And my answer to your question is not terribly different from Logan's answer or Kate's answer, what she talked about briefly, but I can't help but answer that question by thinking of my 10-year-old son, who will be 30 years old if RTANext passes. And I think about, this is a very interesting time for me. I moved here to Tucson exactly 20 years ago, and I didn't move here in time to vote on the first RTA package, but through my advocacy work and the relationships that I've built with people who have been involved in transportation advocacy in Tucson over decades, I learned a lot about the struggle to get that RTA package passed. And I have a lot of appreciation and respect for the people who worked hard on that first RTA to bring us things like the streetcar. And honestly, it kind of stops there. Well, okay, streetcar, wildlife crossings. But I really, as an urban core resident who has lived in the urban core for 20 years, I struggle to embrace the other RTA projects that are currently under construction in the middle of town, which in my opinion are bifurcating the connectivity in our urban core that we used to have. So it's very difficult for me to look at the next 20 years. And to be fair, there are not many of those giant roadway expansion projects in the urban core of Tucson in this next RTA plan, thank goodness. And I think that that's due to a lot of hard work and advocacy by a lot of folks, including many of you here. But what do I want to see more of in the next 20 years? I want to see the streetcar expanded. The streetcar, I think, it took a big leap of faith for people to think that that was going to be a good thing for Tucson. And I think here we are now, 10 years. Let's see, it finished in 2012. So anyway, 15 years after the fact. And I think people are seeing it as a real benefit to downtown, to economic development, to safety, to mobility, to all ages, quality of life enhancement. I want to see more of those things in the future city. I want to see more options that allow my family as I age and my kid to be able to decenter vehicle dependency.
Thank you, Kylie. These are all great points. And I'm seeing quite a few people are celebrating having been on a bicycle, or Dan Stormont mentioned 20 years without a car for him. That's, yeah. All right. And then Logan, you used the streetcar daily, you said, is that right?
I use the bicycle boulevards
the bicycle,
daily,
that's right. Yeah.
but I do use the streetcar probably every other day,
Wow, okay.
and our buses.
All right. Okay. And Gustavo, I was cheering for that. So let's do our, is there any questions someone would like to ask before we do the next round of questions? Okay, well, let's keep going then. The next question, and this is really for everyone. One moment. What are we doing well as a community to bring the visions, the goals that you've just described? What are we doing well as a community to bring those things into being for our community? Community can include governmental agencies, business leaders, labor unions, nonprofits, neighborhood groups. So whatever else is going on, what's something we can all be celebrating? And Kate, I guess you get to start again.
My goodness, that was not on the list of questions you sent over, but I'm going to answer it anyway.
Oh, wait a minute. Did I do that wrong?
It's okay. So we want to talk about the Wildlife Crossing Bridge. So up on SR 77 or Oracle Road, the first RTA plan funded the first and still the only wildlife crossing bridge in southern Arizona. And it's been a massive success for wildlife, also for motorists. We've seen a huge reduction in wildlife vehicle collisions, or put it more bluntly, road-killed animals. And that's a big win for the Tucson, Tortolita, Catalina Mountains linkage that we've been working very hard to reconnect. It's been in critical condition here in Pima County. So that's a huge win for our community. We have other communities across the United States looking at that bridge and the model that we have there of community support for it and celebrating it. You can't go to a conference on road ecology or wildlife connectivity without hearing about our bridge here in the Sonoran Desert. And that's really, really cool. It's something to be proud of. It's something that the RTA board, I can tell, is proud of. They speak of it proudly. So I think that's what our answer would be, Stuart. And I can go on and on about what else we're pleased with in the plan, but I want to keep it short. So
Thank you. Well, then I think in all fairness, I should give you the actual question, which was, it's close, but a little different. So tell us what you're particularly pleased with in the RTA plan.
can't wait to tell you. So it includes $50 million for wildlife linkages. So that is research, it is planning, it is construction for infrastructure that allows wildlife to move across areas that we have created blockages essentially to their movement. And that's mostly roadways that we're talking about. So If that's a wildlife bridge, if that's an underpass, if that's some work to make a culvert easier for animals to use to move under a roadway. There's a lot of different things that they might do, and there's a lot of research that needs to go into deciding what the right thing is in the right place, right? So some of that work has already happened. The RTA plan did start that work, like I just mentioned, but there's a lot left to do in this region. Most critically, we need to help the Tucson Mountains with better connectivity, especially the Tortolita Mountains. We have the threat, and this sounds terrible, but it's true, of total ecological collapse in the Tucson Mountains within only 1 to 2 generations if we do not help them connect to other mountains here in the Tucson Basin. That's the same amount of time as this plan, right? So 20 years. So we see this as a once in a generation opportunity to help the Tucson Mountains. Without this money, we're really at a loss to get money from federal sources. So it's as we see it, our only chance to really help the Tucson Mountains, the Hoyle National Park West, other landscapes that we really rely on as a community. So
Wow, strong words. Thank you for that very much, Kate. So, Logan, what aspects of the plan do you appreciate the most?
Yeah. I'll answer the first question you got that Kate got to answer as well, which is a fun one. The things that our
Okay,
community is
go,
doing
yeah.
well right now.
Yeah.
And the things that I think that we're doing really well at the moment is the city started the El Pueblo Housing Development, which is a nonprofit arm that builds affordable housing in the city. I think, again, the streetcar funding, I think the Mercado district is a really excellent example of building a neighborhood for all people. I don't know if everybody knows, but there is one building dedicated to senior affordable housing. There is one building dedicated to affordable housing. There are multiple row homes that are rented at affordable rates. And then there is market rate housing and also space for around 30 businesses right now. So I think all of that being built because of the parking reductions, because of that streetcar along that route has been really fundamental for creating one of the nicest areas of our city that still has access for all individuals in our city. And one of the things that it does is it recenters our understanding of a city where white flight, we sprawled into suburbs and carved into our desert. All of a sudden, we're seeing that the value of our city is able to be created within our city core again. And then to the question about RTA, the benefits of it, I think that 2% of the funding that goes to environmental projects, I would want to see that massively increased. I think I agree with Kate. I would love to see a massive ecological restoration in our region. I think we've overused almost all of our resources, so it's going to take a lot of funding to get that rebuilt. And I do think albeit the 70 million towards a rapid bus transit, where the streetcar got 75 million, I'm glad that there is funding, even though it is less than the streetcar got, and after inflation, it's dramatically less than the streetcar got. It is there as a token for transit. And I think like it will have some, I'm overall quite, yeah. Whatever funding we can get for transit, I will take and I will appreciate. And if this passes, we'll make sure that we're there to step up and try to maximize it. And there is, albeit not enough as well, safety element funding. We have about one higher roadway deaths for humans than homicide rates, and it is the worst or one of the worst in the country for all users of our roads, which that includes animals, that includes drivers, that includes pedestrians and cyclists. So I am glad that there is some money for safe routes to school and some money for safety elements.
Thanks for bringing those out, Logan, very much. And appreciate your also getting to answer both questions. So let's be sure that Kylie gets to do the same. Would you like to hear either of them again, Kylie?
No, I took notes this time. I appreciate getting to answer the first question too.
Yes.
In early January, and maybe many of you were there, Ward 6 hosted an event we co-hosted an event with Living Streets Alliance and featured a Tucson native alum named Tom Thivner, who was the bicycle and pedestrian coordinator for the city of Tucson for a number of years. And he's been living in Canada for the last decade plus. He got poached from Tucson to build out Calgary, Canada's first protected bike lane network, and he now works in Vancouver, British Columbia. His talk basically coupled transportation investment and transportation priorities with land use reform. And what I think Tucson is doing well is that the city of Tucson is enacting a number of tools, reforms to the code that are going to make it easier for people to build more housing in their backyards, and also for us to build more mixed use corridors along major arterial roads in the city of Tucson. That's the community corridor tool and the middle housing ordinance. Those are two things that I think Tucson is putting into place now that it will take us a generation to see used and shape the city. Those two tools are going to help us build out the walkable nodes, the walkable neighborhoods and communities that I think a lot of us want to see, and that a lot of us just inherently know is going to decrease our dependency on using cars for everyday trips. So I'm excited about those things. And at the same time, when I look at RTANext, what's in the plan, I'm constantly looking for like an alignment between the tools that we are passing at the city council level and the funding that will support that getting built. And in particular, I'm looking to see if there's funding for pedestrian and bicycle safety improvements. There is some. In my opinion, it is not nearly enough to address the very serious pedestrian and bicycle and motorist fatality crisis that we have on our streets. I think the Pima County Health Department, I'm going to get the dates wrong, but they have documented a 243% increase in pedestrian fatalities over the last 6 years. We are legitimately in a pedestrian safety crisis now, but I feel like our funding allotment for that in RTANext doesn't address that substantially. So Logan and Kate both mentioned things that I'm also excited about in RTANext. I mentioned safety. I think it needs to be a lot more. I will also say one thing, this is going to shock you all, that I am excited about that's in RTANext is the money for pavement rehabilitation. You're all getting bombarded by mail with these postcards that say potholes will be fixed and we won't raise your taxes. It's a little bit misleading. They're not going to be actually out there fixing potholes with RTA money, but what they will be doing is curb to curb rehabilitating major corridors in our streets, which, as we all know, is badly needed. But again, that's really going to be to the benefit of car drivers and transit users, because those are on major roads that I will never ride my bike on.
Yeah, appreciate that. Making those points there about the difference between road repair and road rehabilitation. That took a couple of reads on my part to figure that out. So now we're going to let Logan and Kylie first answer the question, and then Kate can reply to that. Essentially, they're going to say, what aspects of the plan do you wish to improve upon or to transcend in the coming years? And Kate, you might like to agree with that, what they say, or you might like to, when your turn comes, to say, well, how RTA actually addresses those things, or are any of those ideas unrealistic? So, Logan, again, what aspects of the plan do you hope to improve upon or to transcend in coming years? And if you've said already, just make a quick reference, but we really do want to hear.
Great. Thank you so much for the question. I think Living Streets Alliance, after evaluating the list of projects, not that there are not good projects in there, we agree with the wildlife linkages and some funding for safety and transportation. But what we do see is that the multimodal streets are not streets that multi-modes can use safely. So if any of you go down Broadway or Grant, it is not a safe space for bicyclists, and it is a road that prioritizes vehicular level of service. Right now, we're currently looking at the road design for First Avenue, and we've been working very closely with the team on that project. And when we look at some intersections that are being expanded to about the width of an I-10 roadway, like Fort Lowell and First Avenue. And when we look at the intersections, they're adding a lot of elements like a slip lane, or a lane where cars can bypass the intersection without stopping, with right turn lanes that cross through bicycle lanes. And when talking with them, we find out that the roads are intentionally being designed unsafely and at the risk of pedestrians and cyclists because of the requirements of RTA, the original RTA, for the level of service of that roadway. Those levels of services are decided by PAG and by RTA. It's usually based on a projected 20-year increase of cars on the roadways, even though we see that First Avenue has had a decrease in cars over that roadway over the 20 years, and Broadway also saw a decrease. We're still using false projections saying that there's going to be a massive increase in cars. So then we create roadways that are extra wide and extra unsafe so that we no longer are willing to walk along First, Broadway, Grant, or the roads that we've seen RTA build. And we're definitely not riding our bicycles on those roads because they are too unsafe for safe bicycle accommodation. So when I look at RTA, our stance from Living Streets Alliance is that we don't see it meeting the goals of safety for our city. We do not see the style of projects of roadway expansions with a striped bicycle lane next to 45-mile-per-hour cars being safe and accessible for all users of our roadway. That's one aspect of it, the safety. We're in a pedestrian crisis and a roadway crisis where drivers, pedestrians, and cyclists are all dying at some of the highest rates independently in this country. The next thing that we have an issue with is the equity aspect of the project, where Tucson donates about 65% of the tax base, which is generated within the city limits of Tucson, and about 49 to 55% of that money is spent back within the city of Tucson. Tucson has about half the income level of the communities, and the majority of the dollars are being spent in communities with about double the income of the city of Tucson. So while we're looking at this project where the highest pedestrian deaths and the highest needs of our community and the highest level of failing roads are often within the city of Tucson limits, and that money is getting spent instead to widen suburban roads and allow for induced development and demand out further into our desert to carve into it and build more tract homes with less amenities. We really don't believe that that's the path forward. We would rather see something like our prop. One of the questions is the city is responsible for repaving neighborhood roads. We really enjoyed Prop 411, that we got a massive consensus. Over 70% of the voters voted for Prop 411, and that repaves all neighborhood streets within 10 years and puts in a lot of safety projects in our city. So for us, we would rather see a project that isn't such a rigid structure that forces us into unsafe roads and forces us to donate our money as a low-income jurisdiction to wealthier jurisdictions. And so we would rather see that money being used with a framework like Move Tucson to build safer roads, to repave all of our arterials, and in that process build actual multi-mobility and actual complete streets that do service all members of our community, not just cars safely. So for us, it's mostly the equity aspect of it and also the safety aspect of it are not meeting what we see as the needs of our community. And then the last one is land use, which Kylie had touched on. And that one is when you look a lot at our corridors like Grant or Broadway, and you see the kinds of development, some amount of building is always going to happen. When we look at Broadway and Grant and a lot of our arterials, what we see mostly is drive-through coffee shop next to coffee shop, next to brake shop, next to oil change shop. And when we look along our streetcar route where we've really invested in our community, what we see is a lot of our El Rio health clinics popping up. We see little cafes. We see a lot of the things that our local businesses opening up along streets that we really invest in community. So we do advise to vote against Prop 418 and 419. And when that process is over, we'll look at funding something either regionally or something like the city going at a half-cent sales tax that would fund Move Tucson, or something like that would work more on the actual needs of our city, prioritizing safety and access for all members of our community. Thank you.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that when we do something like the streetcar, where it allows multimodality of transport, and it's a little slower moving, as it were, that you're creating community there, and rather than just people rushing through. Okay, so Kylie,
Okay, and Stuart, remind me of the question. It's what do I
yes.
find lacking in the plan?
What aspects of the plan do you wish to improve upon or to transcend in the coming years?
Oof. Okay, wait. What aspects of the plan do I wish to improve upon? So that ship has sailed. We can't improve upon it if it's
Okay,
fast.
okay, okay,
Um, well, I'm gonna take a little slightly different tact, and even though I'm here in my capacity as a private citizen, I am going to put the hat on of of working in a council member's office and being hyper cognizant of the city's budget. I echo Logan's comments about the fact that the city of Tucson, as an economic generator that generates about 65% of the regional revenue, is getting back anywhere between 49 and 55%. Best case scenario, they're getting back 55% in the RTA. Do I believe in all of us going to our different jurisdictional camps and saying, well, I put in this much, and so I should get back this much? Not necessarily. I think that perspective was willing to be shelved in the first RTA because the city was getting a transformational project in the streetcar. As much as I personally love bus rapid transit, I don't see the city lined up for a kind of transformational investment this time around. So that gives me heartburn. Um, I really do think that in this time of we're staring down a budget deficit next year of $40 million. There's no way I feel like Tucson leaders can justify sending out any amount of money from City of Tucson jurisdiction, let alone approximately 20 to $22 million annually, by being a good regional partner and sharing its economic largesse with the rest of the region, which has much higher median average incomes than people in the city of Tucson. I think watching Vail grapple with the question of whether or not to incorporate and ultimately rejecting that option for them cemented for me the belief that RTA is working out great for outlying jurisdictions who are able to leverage City of Tucson revenue and get new infrastructure, better paved roads to support sprawling into the desert. And for them, the RTA is great. For Tucson, maybe we're really close to having this right mix of projects and investments in the city of Tucson to make it really difficult for a lot of people to vote no. But I think that this is a moment for people to really say, like, is this extractive uh, scheme working out in Tucsonans' best interests here in the urban core? I know my answer to that um, is that I think any amount of money going out of the city of Tucson to outlying jurisdictions is a no for me, especially when people are using our roads to come to jobs, to come to the university, community colleges, entertainment centers, shopping centers. They're driving on Tucson roads, yet they are not paying for them. That really makes it difficult for me.
okay. So it has to do with equity, as Logan had mentioned. We're very curious now. Kate, how are any of these ideas unrealistic? And just what would you say to your friends, Logan and Kylie and others who have brought up these concerns, these objections?
Yeah, I would say they're really excellent points, honestly. There's very little that I think we would choose to counter there. We would want to comment on the idea of the threat of uncontrolled sprawl, and I'll get to that in a second. So first, just your question you posed to them about areas that could be improved upon. Undoubtedly, there are projects that we think could be better sited, so could be in a better location, excuse me. And there are also projects that we think should be revisited, and we have commented on these endlessly. So many letters written to the RTA board. So for example, the widening of Silver Bell Road, that makes it more difficult for wildlife to move in the Tucson mountain foothills and into our urban washes, right? So that's an area where we see room for improvement. And again, we've consistently commented on these issues. As Kylie said, to an extent, the ship has sailed, but there's a lot of scoping work still to be done on these projects, and we still have chances to input through those processes. So look, sprawl, habitat loss, climate impacts, these are core concerns in all of the work that the Coalition for Sonoran Desert Protection does. It's really important to remember that there are existing conservation tools and guardrails that RTA must operate within. And I think they could do a much better job of communicating that. So this is not sprawl in the absence of controls. We have the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan here in Pima County, award-winning conservation plan that's celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. It is used by the city of Tucson. It is used by Oro Valley. It is used by unincorporated Pima County, and it is recognized by the other jurisdictions as well. We do a lot of work with them on a case-by-case basis. So it has enforceable land use protections that steer growth away from our region's most biologically important lands. We also have other existing tools, such as the county's environmentally sensitive roadway design guidelines. So we don't see this as kind of uncontrolled sprawl. So I think that's the only thing we might counter. Everything else, I think, really excellent points.
Thank you. So you're saying that there are rules, there are regulations, there are procedures that need to be brought to bear in the scoping process, and that sounds like a place where citizens might have a lot to say, and nonprofits as well. So we've got a question. There's several questions coming at this issue. Let's start though with the first one, which was from Bruce Plank. If Tucson City voters vote against RTANext, but voters in other areas vote in favor of it, and they are in the majority, what happens with the bond? Will that affect essentially how it's paid out? Kylie, you've got an answer on that?
Yeah, I can answer that, Bruce. It's not a bond, it's a sales tax. So if it has to pass by a majority of the voters in Pima County, and both questions have to pass. If one passes and not the other, it's no good. We all go back to the drawing board.
Okay, thank you, Kylie. Then Stephen Mankey asks, why is RTANext the only generational opportunity? What would happen if it did not pass? Would there not still be an imperative to generate quickly a new plan?
I'd be happy to answer that question.
Yeah, Logan.
Yeah, so I think when I'm looking at RTA, and if it passes again, I will be happy for the wildlife linkages and the aspects that we get. If it does not pass, then what we will have is a large funding gap. There is some funds in RTA, the original RTA, that will carry through until I think it's July. And then there will be a gap, and that will affect our transit, and that will be a challenging and difficult time for us to work through while we're dealing with this budget deficit citywide or region-wide. But I think what that would lead us to is having to move towards a really community-driven plan. I think one of the comments Dan brought up 414 failing because everybody found something to hate in it, and hearing the same about now 418 and 419. I think if I were looking at a different plan, the majority of people, when polled about RTANext, it's the pavement condition and its safety is what most people in the city want. So I would say looking at Prop 411, which is neighborhood road repaving and safety projects, that passed with over 70% of the vote. So I think if it fails within the city, then of course we would look at something like a new proposition, probably by the November election, because that funding gap is going to be very serious. A November election with a Move Tucson funded is what City of Tucson would do if we can't get regional consensus, which RTA has had a lot of trouble with consensus, including disbanding their community advisory council or citizen advisory council and issues like that. But I think a different proposition that would fund pavement rehabilitation on our arterials instead of just on our neighborhood roads, and safety projects and transit projects. And I think that would have a lot likelier chance of getting passed within the city of Tucson.
Thank
And
you.
Dan, wait, sorry, I'll step back in. Dan said it sounds like it would be
Right.
hard to get a new prop for transit. If you look at Move Tucson with its tier 1 projects, that level of projects over a 20-year period would fund most of those tier 1 projects, which includes both the north and south BRT or light rail, bus rapid transit or light rail from the Tohono Tadai Transit Center to downtown to the airport, potentially a Broadway rapid bus. It has a lot more capital transit improvement projects in Move Tucson. We spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and hundreds of thousands of hours developing that plan as a city of Tucson. If it had a funding mechanism, it's sitting waiting. If it had a funding mechanism, it would immediately fund a lot of those things. And it would end up, if you look at the tier 1 projects, repaving most of our arterials and making them within our city past complete streets policy. It would make them actual multimodal corridors and not just a 45-mile-per-hour roadway with a painted stripe. So that would be, it would all fit within that Move Tucson framework.
Wow.
And
So-
Stuart, could I add a couple?
Please.
I've only been working for the city for 2.5 months, and before that I was working at the county, and I know Kate can speak to this a lot more too, but just looking at the county perspective for a second, what happens if RTANext fails? So County Board of Supervisors can, by unanimous vote, enact a sales tax designated for a specific purpose at any point that it chooses to, but it has to be unanimous. We already know of at least one county supervisor who has said he's unwilling to do that. However, that could also be posturing before March 10th happens. We'll see if that person is also from the car industry. And so, being faced with the reality of there not being a dedicated transit or a dedicated transportation funding source could change his mind. So too could pressure from his constituents, just saying. But they could also choose to reconfigure property taxes in this budget cycle to dedicate some property taxes to go towards transportation funding. The county does have some options, albeit they are slim. I see Natalie on here, and I know Natalie knows a lot about this too. I mean, when it comes to funding regional transit, which is really important, this is paratransit, this is dial-a-ride, sun shuttle, all this stuff that folks, especially in rural Pima County, rely on. There are not good options. Those are entirely funded by RTA funding. And it, like Logan painted the picture, I can't disagree with it. It would be painful at first for those services if RTA failed. However, I am confident that regional leaders at both the county and the city level would figure out pathways to make that as short and as least painful as possible, and they would come together and solve problems. I think when people are faced with challenges, they do rise to the occasion. That's my belief.
Thank you. It's really interesting to hear these angles that are being brought up. And at some point, Kate, I'll ask you if we get time about some of the conservation plans, rules and requirements, et cetera, that citizens could call on and nonprofits could call on. But first, I want to keep our flow going here. By the way, thank you everybody for asking questions. It's so nice. You're really giving the speakers a chance to be the ones tonight to really deal with the puzzles that you're presenting. So make sure we're not here to make any statements. As listeners, we're here to ask really tasty questions. So let's see. Laura said, what is your best guess as to the odds that the city could regroup and invest even more in transit and safe streets funding? And that Tucson, okay, I think we've already heard about the chances for county doing something. So she's asking about city. And Dan essentially says, do you think there is an appetite within the city for a new tax to fund projects given the current economic environment? and a large percentage of Tucsonans who do not want to see, who do want to see road projects. And that might again be going to Kylie.
So I'm going to answer this question, Dan, and I'm going to call on our friends here who are in this panel that I entered this world of politics through advocacy, and I come from a community organizing background. And if we want to see a half-cent city-only sales tax to fund the priorities of Move Tucson, including transit, we are going to need to hear from people that that is what you want. We are excited to see all this organizing happening through the Tucson Deserves Better website. It's also called nortanext.com. That's a place where you can go to see individuals and organizations that have signed on to this vision that Tucson does deserve better. And while this group right now is opposing RTANext, they're also ready to pivot and advocate for a half-cent sales tax as soon as possible, hopefully this November, to fund these exact things. Do I think it's possible? Dan, you are asking the wrong person. I am an eternal optimist. I think everything is possible if we just work hard enough and organize hard enough. There was one other thing I wanted to say, though, and I just lost my train of thought. It'll come back to me. I'll stop there because I talked a lot. But yeah, this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to lay out a reality check for people. So this is how it works to refer a ballot, to refer a measure to the ballot for voters to vote on this November. We basically have to have it all in place, ready for mayor and council to approve and send to the ballot on April 21st. So the RTA election is on March 10th. We will know on March 11th if it was successful or not. We have 3 mayor and council meetings that people will need to go to and push our elected officials to refer a measure to the ballot in November. So
By
plug in,
April
lock
24?
in, get ready.
Is that by April 24, Kylie?
April 21st.
21st. Oh gosh. Okay. I think that's right around Earth Day. Okay. So please, it will be Paula or Trace has a question.
Yeah, it's Kate said that the RTANext is not a means of promoting sprawl, but I have to strongly disagree. It's a continuation of a long-standing policy of promoting sprawl by every means available. So the county is required to calculate a road development fee. They calculate that every new house is going to add 10 miles of driving to the major arterials. And then they exclude 70% of it because it's either doesn't start or into the house or is inside the city. So the county refuses to collect any funds for the effects of development outside the city limits. And as a result, you and I and everybody else is spending about $25,000 for every additional house we add. And that's why we keep having all this sprawl. So until the city says, you guys got to collect $10,000 or $15,000 per house to pay for the roads inside the city, I don't think we should be supporting anything that the county or PAG is supporting.
Trace, do you have a question?
Nope.
Kate, do you wish to respond?
No, I guess I'll just reiterate that I didn't say there's no sprawl. I just said it's not uncontrolled. So there are guardrails in place. I also saw a question on Maveen Behan and what she might think of RTANext, right? I'm going to share a link in our chat here of the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan's conservation lands system map. And you'll see that the majority of the RTANext projects don't overlap with, again, what I was saying are those highest biological value areas that have been carefully mapped by scientists here in Pima County. Not to say that there is no overlap in the areas where there are overlap. You can rest assured we have been heavy to comment on. So I definitely, agree that there is some sprawl element here. there's somewhat of an inevitability there. We will see development in Pima County. We do hope that we also see infill and other positive policies like that alongside it, and we're a strong supporter of those. I'm sure Kylie and Logan would be as well.
Thank you, Katie. Now, Stephen, let me ask her on this and then we'll go to Stephen. Could you name for us those environmentally sensitive sort of scoping issues and the existing conservation rules and requirements that they could actually help us shape how these roads would be done that would be better for multimodal transportation and wildlife, et cetera?
Now, I don't want to say that these are solutions for multimodal transportation, right? But they are.
Okay.
The first would be what I mentioned earlier, the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan, which is the
Okay.
map I just shared with you there. Its main tool is that conservation land system. So it directs development away from those green areas towards areas that are of lower biological value. So it tries to protect the highest, and you can see there's an awful lot of green. So we're saying an awful lot of Pima County is high biological value. Now, the second tool I mentioned earlier is the environmentally sensitive roadway design guidelines. So both those tools are important. And there's some other tools around native plant preservation and things of that nature. So
Okay. Thank you. Stephen.
Yeah, the question I have is the wildlife overpass on Oracle is great, but how much did it cost to build? How much would the next one cost to build, given that they've widened the road even more all the time?
Mm.
In other words, are you going to have enough funding to even build one, much less the system you're talking about?
yeah, it's a great question. So the wildlife bridge, and there just a mile south of it, there's an underpass because some species like to go over, some like to go under. Those combined, the research that went into those projects, and also some fencing that helps funnel animals towards those structures, that combined was just over 11 million 10 years ago. So we all know that there's an incredible amount of inflation in the construction industry. 50 million is going to get us probably one of those structures now, one of those projects, right? So but that's not our call. So that's that wildlife linkages working group is going to decide what's the highest priority, what we can get out of that 50 million budget, see what we can get out of federal funding sources, see what we can get out of Pima County, et cetera. So I think I saw a comment there, one project in 20 years is quite sad. I want to make it clear there were many wildlife linkage projects. So there's 25 million spent, 11 million on a wildlife bridge, wildlife underpass. So there's several other projects in that category.
Mm. Okay. Thank you.
If I could jump in a little bit,
Yeah.
what I would like to say is, like, Kate, I think the work that your group does is invaluable. And I've been following the projects you've been doing, including the wildlife linkages. I think that they're really important and valuable, especially if RTA, if as a region we're not looking at our planning, then it's going to take a lot of work to push the county to fund those projects, because I don't think the jurisdictions will want to take on that load of project on their own. And then I think when we talk about the idea of sprawl, a lot of that idea is induced demand. So most people are wanting to commute. Our region has an average commute of about 24 minutes right now. That's at or below most of our peer groups. We don't have a speed issue. Widening those roads further does push development further out, as people can access faster through the city, access their jobs, or access different areas of the city. So if you look at the solution that Phoenix has taken, is a massive amount of distance covered at very high speeds. Most commutes are averaging around 60 miles per hour because it's predominantly on a freeway grid. So if we do work to preserve the space around our city, and if we do work to keep our roads smaller and slow down some of those long stretch commutes and prioritize safer local neighborhood streets, then that pressure out of people being willing to say, I'm going to take an hour commute through the Tucson mountains is going to be reduced. Where if we put a freeway directly across, so that's where I'd say, like, I think their work is fantastic, and I think it is invaluable. And I think that if RTA does not pass, then I think it'll be all of us working together, and we would gladly support pushing the county to fund more more wildlife connections and more wildlife preservation. So I think that's a little comment on sprawl and induced demand and road widths.
Stuart, can
Thank
I
you,
also
Linda.
add one thought here? I also want to just jump in and say that during my time working at the county, I appreciated very much the contributions of the coalition, of the the Mavine Behan Wildlife Conservation Plan. Some of my favorite meetings to attend were actually the county's planning and development services, where you got to have an upfront view of how developers were actively offsetting development impacts by by purchasing and protecting land in sensitive areas. I think the Tortolitas is one of them. I think the area down by where Colossal Cave is another one. Am I right about that, Kate? I also want to tell a short story about something that really broke my heart as a pragmatist, Dan, and as also somebody who believes that we have to make tough choices. But when I first started working at the county in 2020, at the very beginning of the Citizen Advisory Committee plan to put together the RTANext draft plan. It wasn't the very beginning. They actually convened in 2018, but with COVID, they took a hiatus. They came back together in 2020, 2021. When I started working for Supervisor Matt Hines, the county's stated goals for transportation investment in the future were no new capacity roadway projects. We have a safety crisis on our hands. Our priorities are safety. I can't remember the other ones. Basically, they had a slide deck that said, when RTANext asks us what we want to fund, safety and roadway pavement maintenance, right? Those are the two priorities of county residents. The RTANext plan development was structured such that each jurisdiction was invited to submit their priority projects, and the only ones that qualified for consideration were roadway capacity projects. So a ripple effect went out through all the jurisdictions that said, shoot, if we don't come up with some road projects to fund, we might not get any RTANext funding. And I think that was a huge lost opportunity on the part of jurisdictions to come together and say, no, this is not our priority right now. Our priority is funding and maintenance. But because of the dysfunction at the board and director level at PAG and RTA, that wasn't possible. So my heart broke when I watched the county submit their number one priority project, which is Colossal Cave Road extension down in Vale. And at that point, I became very jaded, cynical about there being room for rehabilitation in the governance structure of RTA. Now, we have since seen the removal and replacement of the executive director. We have an interim / permanent executive director in Mike Ortega there now. However, as much as they say that they are revising and reforming the policies and procedures that govern the RTA, I have yet to see that translate to the governance structure at the RTA board level. And I think that as long as we maintain this 9-member voting structure where one vote per jurisdiction is the way that decisions are made, that there can always be the opportunity for smaller jurisdictions and in some cases tribes to be convinced to vote against the priorities of the county, the priorities of the city. We watched it happen for the last 14 years. And even if there are a lot of reforms in the policies and procedures, without there being a different decision-making balance on the RTA and PAG boards, I'm not convinced that it can't happen again.
It sounds as though you're saying that there are risks if we vote against it because we can't be sure of who would actually come forward quickly enough to fill the gaps. And yet I'm hearing also that it's a risk that might be worth taking because then we won't be on that road to more sprawl as quickly. Is that a fair summary of what Logan, you and Kylie are saying?
I
Yeah.
believe what Kyle's saying is that they were only considering projects that were expansion. So if you did not include expansion projects, you would not be included in the funding. So you would not get any project.
Okay. So Dan.
Yeah, I'm trying not to just, keep doing the chat thing here. So, and Kylie, this is mostly for you because you're the one that's probably going to have to deal with this if, as kind of seems inevitable, 418, 419 doesn't pass. And so, as a transit writer, for example, I don't know how is the city even going to keep the buses going. Fare free is dead. We know that. I mean, there's no way they could afford fare free if I'm not sure they can afford it even if it does pass, but especially if it doesn't pass, fare free is going to be gone. I don't know how service levels can be maintained. Certainly expansion of transit can't be maintained. And, Logan, I don't want to sound negative. I know I'm kind of curmudgeonly, but, I've been totally on board with complete streets and Move Tucson, been involved in both of those through the planning process and promoting them, so it's not that I mean, if it was up to me, I would shut down downtown to all vehicular traffic and I would make all neighborhood streets local traffic only. But that's me. And there are a lot of people who don't agree with me. But, I'm just trying to figure out, it's kind of like it is not a great plan. And a lot of it's that process. And we see this a lot with any large area, like, it's county process, but it's also shaped by the state transportation planning process. And so all of these things you end up with this plan that nobody really likes, but I honestly don't see how we have a good way forward because I'm not as optimistic as all of you are that, people that really want the roads repaved are going to be willing to say, oh, yeah, let's go ahead and pass a proposition for more buses. Because I hear from so many people, it's like, we want to get rid of buses. We want them to be self-sustaining. I looked it up. It'd be $4 a ride if buses were going to be self-sustaining. So, how do you like reconcile those things?
This will be our last question for our formal part of the evening.
So I want to just break out a little bit what the RTA funds for Tucson Transit. I already talked about the regional transit. It funds a lot. Currently, the RTA is funding about $22 million per year for the region for transit. About 10 of that goes to the city to pay for the things that were specifically line item listed in 2006. Expanded evening, expanded weekday, express routes. If RTANext doesn't pass, those would be the things that go away. Not all of transit, but those evening, weekend, and express routes. And then the city of Tucson would have to figure out, we don't know yet what the bridge length is, right? Like we'd have to figure out some bridge funding, but we don't know where it ends. If we voted in November for a supplemental half-cent sales tax that went to both safety and transit, for example, that would be a very short bridge. We'd have to come up with some funding to maintain all that service. And then we can start collecting revenue to reinvest back into the service. I also want to point out that while it looks like there's a lot of money in RTANext for transit, it's not because we failed to calculate for inflation. RTANext isn't going to help us expand transit. I know it says it, but we got very little expansion the first time around in regular bus service. This is not going to change our lives as bus riders, as transit users, if RTANext passes. I agree with you. I also hear a lot of people who don't understand the value of a well-funded, clean, safe, well-run transit system. However, any of us go to other similarly sized municipalities, all I hear from people coming back from those places is, my goodness, people have decided to invest in transit in other municipalities of 1 million people, and you sure can tell. I mean, look at Phoenix, right? Look at El Paso. Look at at Austin, they've got really well-funded transit systems, and I would argue that their voter base is just as conservative as ours. I think what we haven't seen are champions yet who have grabbed the collective imagination and said, we want this kind of future and we're willing to organize for it. And I think that that's changing. We hired a whole bunch of people at Ward 6 who are young people and major transit nerds, major transit advocates. They're desperate for this kind of future. The next part obviously is leveraging them into agents for change in our community. But that's why I'm hopeful, is that I think a lot of people have gone off to college, come back to Tucson because it's still relatively affordable, and have said, you know what? I don't want to have to own a car here. I would like there to be options. And I think they're ready to put some skin in the game. So, yes, Dan, it's going to be painful if this doesn't pass. It's going to be hard. We are going to see some cuts. I don't know if I'm ready yet to give up on fare free transit. But I think that, again, if we hear from people and we organize, we can see a different outcome.
I'm really hoping you're right. I mean, that's what I want to, but yeah, it's just, I see a lot of other stuff happening. So yeah, we'll have to see what happens.
Thank you. And one of the things that's heartening about this is how we can be so clear on some different angles on what's the next thing to do, and yet to be sharing the same goals and interests. And this kind of spirit, I think, is something we want to see happening much more in our hearings, in our public meetings, in our neighborhood associations. It's very easy to get caught in positionality, and I'm hearing a lot of interest language, people talking about needs, interests, visions, goals, and then the means by which to do that becomes what's negotiable. Interests aren't negotiable, but methods for fulfilling them are. And Jana just mentions what will happen to our council if we do try to follow those paths. I think we'll always find that concern, and makes us compassionate for those who are having some very hard votes these days at higher national levels. It's not an easy job for them. And we thank our speakers, Kylie, Kate, and Logan, for having such energy for this and so much knowledge and such a willingness to lean in, and makes us, I think, feel more hopeful about the outcome, whatever the vote would turn out to be. So it's time, if there are any announcements to make. Paula, I think you get first dibs on making an announcement.
No, I just want to remind people, if you want to sign up for the newsletter, if you're not getting it yet, Paula at sustainabletucson.org, and I'll add you to the list. We're going to be having a summit in late April, investing in people and infrastructure. So keep an eye out for details about that. It should be a very exciting event. And we hope to see you all at the next Sustainability Spotlight, which will be the second Tuesday of March.
Thank you, Paula. And Jana?
I am Janice Siegel-Starmont, and I'm the lead of the environmental advocacy email list. If you would like to join it and get calls to action about different environmental issues, particularly right now what's going on at the state, there's a lot of really terrible water bills. There were so many, they had to have an extra committee meeting to have all their bad water bills presented. So if you would like to push back on the bad water bills, and there's even one that makes it illegal to have residential solar, which we just put in, which is very scary for us. So anyway, you might want to weigh in on some of these really super bad bills by joining the Request to Speak app. And if you want to get those calls to action, so email me at jenna@sustainabletucson.org.
Thank you so much, Janet, for keeping that going for so long. And Bruce,
Hi, folks. I wanted to remind people that even though the big ugly bill that passed Congress got rid of all the tax credits for energy efficiency improvements in solar, the state Office of Resiliency and Efficiency Arizona has rebates that are available, and for a variety of things: heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, rewiring, new panels, and so on and so forth. So if you're interested in that and you want to get more information, or if you'd like to become a coach, I'm part of the Sustainable Tucson Energy Transformation Working Group, and the main project we've been doing is Go Electric AZ. You could take a look at goelectricaz.org and see what we're up to. We'd encourage people, you can contact me at bruce@goelectricarizona.org, or take a look at the website, and we're happy to try to help you or your neighbors or anybody else figure out if they're eligible to get a rebate, for example, of up to $8,000 to get a heat pump, or a variety of other rebates. So those are still available. You don't have to be quite as depressed as you might be because the tax credits went away. So we're encouraging slight improvement in attitude about those things by virtue of these rebates. So contact me or look at the website. Thanks.
Does that have to be limited income to qualify for that?
If your income is less than 150% of the median income of the Tucson metropolitan area, you're eligible for some rebates. The largest rebate is for low-income people. If your income is above that, you're not eligible for the rebates. There's a middle ground where you're eligible for partial rebates if you're between 80% and 150% of that median income. So you can quickly find out if you're eligible by going to efficiencyarizona.com. There's a box on the upper right on that website that you click, and the first thing that happens is you put in your income, and it tells you if you're eligible for some rebates or not. Very, very simple. And then once you find out if you are eligible, what you might be able to get and what it might cover.
thank you, Bruce. And I'll make the last announcement, which is that on April 23rd and 24th, we have the Investing in People and Infrastructure Summit, sponsored by Pima Community College. It'll be in the Azurite Room there, part of their technology division. And several of the people who are here today have been involved in the planning for that. It should be very exciting. Keep your eye on our newsletter for registration, and it should be a really wonderful look at ways that we can take a holistic approach to conserving energy, conserving resources, developing a workforce that has a livable wage, and preserving the arts and the uniqueness of Tucson, all through just a little bit of rethinking of what it means to be economically prosperous. But finding where the monies can be saved, and that can help build our local economy. So that's an exciting, big idea. Skip Leitner has been our champion on that. He couldn't come tonight, but he'll be a big part of that presentation. And I've got a question, I think, to close, Kylie, for you, which is, you said in order of effectiveness, email, calls, and call to audience. So you're saying email is the most effective way to advocate?
No, sorry, I guess I did that in opposite order. Going from
Okay.
least effective to most effective. Sorry.
No,